Could you state your full name, please?
Shirley Eloise Lawson Shannon.
Did you have a nickname?
Shirley, and sometimes Princess.
What's your current age?
67.
And what is your current address?
2044 Hubbard Road, apartment 108, Madison.
And when were you born?
January 8th, 1922.
And where was that?
In Rome, Ohio.
Were you born at home or in a hospital?
All babies were born at home in those days.
How far did you go with your formal education?
Graduated Jefferson High School and about 6 months of nurses training at Huron Hospital in Cleveland.
And what is your current occupation?
Babysitting.
Well, you've done more than babysitting.
Babysitting all my life, but I also spent 20 years in the banking business as an escrow officer. Worked for 2 months for Consolidated Aircraft during the war.
So you're retired banking. That's where you spent most of your year.
That was my main occupation. Yes.
And what is your current marital status?
I'm a widow.
Is your mother living?
No, she isn't.
What
She died in 1974.
was your mother's maiden name?
Louise Reed Chapin.
Do you have any idea what her nationality was?
A mixture of Scotch, Irish, English, French. A little of everything.
Did she have a nickname that you're aware of?
Her parents called her Louie, but in a playful way we were allowed to call her Weezer.
And where was she born?
In Burlington, Montana, in 1893. No, 1891. See? Brain damage, kids.
How far did she go with her formal education?
She graduated from Jefferson Educational Institute in 1911, and after her husband died, graduated from Kent State in 1929.
What was her occupation?
She was a teacher for 32 years.
Whereabouts did she teach?
She started in a one-room school in Rome, a two-room school in Geneva. She taught second and third grade in North Bloomfield. She taught third and first in Jefferson over the whole period of 32 years.
Did your mother have any special hobbies or interests that you're aware of?
Everything that moved. She had many projects, most of which she never finished.
Like what?
Like fancy work, genealogy.
What would you say her general health was like?
Always very good, quite strong until the later years it was arthritis.
Is there anything that stands out in your mind about your mother?
Very strong, dominant person. Usually very fair. Just in charge lady.
At what age did she die?
80. I really don't remember. Subtract it. I'm not good at math. I worked in a bank. I cannot do math. She died in 1974.
Can you recall about how old you were at the time of her death?
Yes. Well,
ballpark figure.
50, baby.
Do you know what the cause of death was?
It was ultimately heart failure, of course, but just plain worn out.
Where's she buried?
In Rome, Ohio.
Is your father living?
No. He died in 1926 at the age of 34.
What was his full name?
Joe Benjamin Walker.
And do you know what his nationality was?
English, Scotch, Irish.
Everybody seems like they're one of them.
Yeah, more or less a melting pot.
Did he have a nickname?
Pat.
Do you have any idea how he got that?
Only because he hated his name too. He said it was like a big cough.
Where was he born?
On Munson Hill Road in Saybrook in 1893. He was 2 years younger than my mom.
What was his mother's maiden name?
Ruth Ann Markham.
How far did your dad go with his formal education?
Well, he had 5 years of high school just to play football. He never graduated. You were allowed to do that in those days.
What was his occupation?
Anything mechanical. He spent most of his working years at Erie Forge in Erie, Pennsylvania. And after his ill health hit him, he studied electricity with the ICS Scranton courses, became a licensed electrician, and opened his own shop in Rockford.
Was he in the service, military?
No, his draft number was the first one called in Erie, Pennsylvania in 1917. But there they discovered his heart was very bad, so that he stayed on to volunteer in the induction center to help with examinations.
Did he have any special hobbies or interests that you're aware of?
Mechanical and electrical. He did a lot of amateur boxing. Football, of course, when he was in high school.
What would you say his general health was like?
His heart condition apparently started when he was about 12 years old with what we call rheumatic fever. But he had very bad tonsillitis, strep throats, they called it quinsy, which weakened his heart. So that by the time he was a young man, he was a big husky man, but with a very poor heart.
Is there anything that stands out in your mind about your dad?
I do remember him.
Okay, now you were pretty young.
I was 4 years old.
4.
But he was a big, soft-spoken, just a gentleman.
Okay, now what age did you say he was when he passed away?
He was 34.
He was 34, and you were 4 at the time. And he died of a heart condition.
Yes, quite suddenly. He had a year's disability. They sent him to bed to rest for a year. That's when he studied his electricity. And just worn out.
And where is he buried?
In Long Island.
Okay, I'd like to ask some questions about you as a youth. Where did you live as a child? What city?
Ooh, I don't remember the house in Erie, Pennsylvania. But when my father was so ill, we were moved to the farm in Rome, my grandparents' farm, called Lone Tree Farm. That was every summer. After my mother started teaching, we were in Bloomfield. Well, I spent my first grade in Kent while she got her degree. We were in Bloomfield for probably 6 years, and then moved to Jefferson.
When did you move to Jefferson?
1934.
You would have been how old?
12.
12. Okay. Is the house in Jefferson still standing?
Yes.
You know
Both
yet?
of them.
Oh. You know what the address is?
No, one on Walnut Street and another one on Jefferson Street.
Did you have indoor plumbing in, say, the house in Jefferson?
Oh my, yes, yes,
You're
that was
real
a big,
civilized.
yes. The years on the farm naturally were pretty pretty.
How many children were in your parents' family?
I had two brothers, one older, one younger.
So you're in the okay.
I'm
You're in the middle. What are the names of your brothers?
My older brother is Oliver Jacobson. My younger brother was Allison Reeve Laughlin.
Are your brothers both living?
Only the older one, Oliver.
What did your brothers do for? What was their occupation?
Now that's a stumper. Oliver spent many years at the post office in Rock Creek. I suppose he'd call that his main occupation. He also sold real estate and did title work. My younger brother worked with the Reliance Electric, then started his own business. He did the racks for electro-welding and chroming.
Was your mom pretty strict with the children?
She was a firm school teacher mother.
Did you have any household chores and duties to perform when you were growing up?
Endless dusting of terrible Victorian furniture and ironing pillowcases, two chores that I still dislike. Gathering the eggs, feeding the chickens, the usual whatever the kid can do around the farm. That was still ladylike, of course.
Do you feel that the Depression affected your life in any way?
It was depression from the time my father died, yes. The Depression was a bitter lesson.
Did your mom give you an allowance?
Oh my, no. What do you mean an allowance? Lucky to get 10 cents for hamburger. And that was a pound.
Did you have any part-time jobs as you were growing
As a
up?
babysitter.
You started doing that
Right back
early.
where I am.
Would you say that finances were a problem in the household as you were growing up?
Always. Always. And even into marriage.
Would you consider yourself a good student when you were in school?
No. I definitely was an underachiever. I didn't like the personalities of the eggheads. I was probably a B student.
What was the name of the high school you went to?
Jefferson High School.
Would you consider yourself a rebellious teenager?
No, I had my fun within limits. No, I wouldn't have dared rebel.
Did you and your family attend church on a regular basis?
Now you mean regular every Sunday? No. We knew from the time we were born we were Episcopalians, but there was no Episcopal church close. So we went with our friends. We joined the youth groups, the Methodist. Well, as a child, the Presbyterian church. I'm quite ecumenical.
Were you in any school activities?
Yes.
Extracurricular activities?
Anything but sports. I never wanted to exert myself. I was on the newspaper. I spent 4 years on the debate club, 6 years in the high school band, the choir, briefly the orchestra.
What kind of musical instrument?
Briefly the orchestra was a violin, which I hated. the clarinet, and then the bass clarinet in the band.
What can you recall you did for entertainment as a youngster?
Anything a youngster can think of. Oh, roller skating, sleighs, sled riding, movies, endless movies. We saw the movies every time they changed because it was only 10 cents. Dancing.
Were they talking in those movies back then?
Certainly. Now, I can remember my first talking picture. I was probably about 6. And we went to Ashtabula to see that one.
You recall what the name of it was?
Keep your sunny side up.
Did you have any pets this year?
Endless. Farm cats, house cats, 2 dogs specifically. One was a part Dalmatian, and we named him Smokey, and he was a fool. Our long-term pet was Jerry. He was part German Shepherd.
Did you ever teach him any tricks?
He could catch, and he could speak, he could shout, he could whisper.
Are there anything special, events, good or bad, that stand out in your mind as a kid?
You mean frightening?
Well, good or bad, just anything.
Oh, from here it all looks good. Traumatic, probably my father's death. It was a pretty level life.
Do you recall what the first car you ever would have driven?
Me drive? My older brother tried to teach me to drive a 28 Ford sedan, but I backed into the rail fence and he refused to go with me again. I did not drive until I was probably in my 30s, and my husband taught me, which is really a great mistake. I'm an excellent driver. He wasn't.
How did you, as a child, how did you spend a typical Christmas?
Family. Endless family. Large meals.
Did you visit your grandparents?
We lived with my grandparents, therefore we went with Grandpa to the woods and cut our own Christmas tree, decorated our own, with many homemade decorations. No, it was an old family farm Christmas.
Now, when you say the grandparents that you lived with, now was this your
My
dad?
My mother's parents, Isaac Newton Chapin and Harriet Amelia Reeve Chapin.
Now, was this in Ohio or?
Rome.
We're still in Rome. Okay.
In my teen years, of course, we were in Jefferson, and it was always a festive occasion, very religious festive occasion.
How old were you when you left home?
18, went into nurses training.
Okay, so that was the reason you left, was to go to school.
Oh yes.
You went. Where was it you went to school?
Huron Road Hospital in Cleveland, East Cleveland.
So did you commute, or did you just
weekends by Greyhound bus?
Okay, now how old were you when you met your husband?
I was probably 5 years old. He was 6. Maybe no, it would be younger than that. But no, they lived across the street from us in Rock Creek for the brief time that we were there. And then again, in Jefferson, his mother and my mother had known each other for years, so they lived across the street from us on Walnut Street for a brief period.
Can you recall your first date? Where you went? What you did?
We were really on a train coming back from the band contest, and Jim's girlfriend, Mary Jane, had made him angry, so he came over to sit with me to pout. And I kind of got him on the rebound. Really didn't like the boy before then. He was too good looking to him, and he knew it.
Okay, now, what was your husband's full name?
James Peter Shannon.
And when did he die?
He died in 1977.
And at what age?
56.
And what was the cause of his death?
Heart failure due to 30 years of diabetes.
And where did Jim die?
In Tucson, Arizona. We were on vacation. Went out to bring his mother back from Arizona.
Where's he buried?
In Painesville.
Okay, I'd like to ask you some questions of what you know about Jim's childhood. Did he have a nickname?
Jim. Well, I called him Peter, but.
And when was he born?
In 1921, July 17th.
And where would that have been at?
Burton, Ohio.
How far did he go with his formal education?
He graduated from Jefferson High School and had 2 years at Kent. Pre-med.
Is his mother living?
No, she isn't.
And do you know what her maiden name was?
Antoinette Irene Nevison.
Did she have a nickname?
Nettie.
And do you know where his mother was born?
Someplace in Pennsylvania. I always want to say Tylersville, but that's not right, I'm sure.
Do you have any idea how far she went with her formal education?
She was a registered nurse. Her high school, I have no idea, but she graduated from Asheville Hospital as a nurse.
Did she have any special interests that you would be aware of?
Only the health of everybody. Health and development. Cleanliness above all.
Is there anything that sticks out in your mind about your mother-in-law?
Another strong, determined, self-sufficient woman.
I feel like there's a lot of those in the family.
We grew up in a fatherless household, and they had to be strong.
Do you know what age she died? How old she was when she died?
It slips my mind, Jack.
Do you have any?
79, perhaps.
Do you have any idea what the cause of her death was?
Again, the heart worn up.
Do you know where she's buried?
In Rock Creek, Ohio.
All right. What do you know about Jim's dad's family?
Everything that he could remember.
Do you know what his full name was?
Martin Francis Shannon.
Did he have a nickname?
Martin.
Do you know where he was born?
Albion, Pennsylvania, I suppose, or Springfield.
Do you have any idea how far he would have gone in his formal education?
He was a doctor of dentistry.
So he died when Jim was pretty young.
He died in 1929, so Jim would be 8 years old. Sunday.
How old was Jim when his dad died?
Probably 8 years old, back in 1929.
Do you know where his dad is buried?
In Algie, Pennsylvania? I'm not sure of that.
Okay, now I'd like to get into some stuff what you were aware of Jim when he was a young man growing up. Where did he grow up at? Where were we?
Many, many places.
Okay.
His father moved his office often. He remembers going to the first grade in Madison, Ohio. Before that, they lived in Fairport briefly. But then he remembers Chagrin Falls. Jefferson was in there someplace. But in 1929, they went to Alliance, and he was in Alliance in Park Elementary School, I suppose, in Alliance. So from 29 until probably 1934, they were in Alliance and then moved to Jefferson. So that he was a 7th grader when they moved to Jefferson. But they had been in school in Jefferson before. So it wasn't a stranger.
So from 34 on, he lived in Jefferson.
Yes.
How many children were in his family?
He had 2 brothers, an older brother John and a younger brother Bill.
Are his brothers still living?
His older brother is.
Was Jim a good student when he was in school?
Average CB student.
Was he what you would consider a rebellious teenager?
Oh my no. He was a jock. He toed the line. Probably more than I wanted him to.
Was he in any school activities that you're aware of?
He was in track, briefly in baseball. He didn't like baseball, but big in basketball. Track, height jumping, and relays.
Did he play any musical instruments?
He played the tuba in the band probably for 6 years.
Okay, now we're going to move on to your married life. When and where were you married?
Jefferson, Ohio, Trinity Episcopal Church on November 6th of 1941. A rainy, nasty night.
Where was your first home?
We lived for about 3 months in a little house off of 306, which would be either Minter or Willoughby. Then Liberty Street in Painesville for about 3 years. Then there was 2 years plus in the service, so that the children and I were in Jefferson, Ohio with my mother. After he was discharged from the Navy, we lived briefly in the Veterans Housing on Walnut Street in Painesville. Tin shacks that the government put up. Another year, perhaps, in the 2nd floor apartment on Newell Street. We bought a house on Glenwood, 411 Glenwood, in 1949. Lived there until 1958, when we built a house on Ridgecrest, 118 Ridgecrest in Painesville. We sold that house in 1969. Went to an apartment in Warrensville Heights for until 74. 69 to 74 in the apartments.
And then, yeah, from then on.
Jim died 2 years after that. So that I lived there until, when did I move there? I draw a blank. Brain damage.
About 2 years. You've been here much more.
I've been here 3 years.
What did Jim do for a living?
25 years at the Industrial Rayon Corporation. When we were married, he worked for Ohio Rubber in Willoughby, but they were not a democratic group, so when war was declared, it was shut down. So he was 25 years at the Rayon, and then as a quality control man at Industrial Electronic Rubber in Twinsburg. And from there, probably in 1971, he went to Fasson in Haynesville as research and development manager.
What branch of the service was Jim?
He was in the Medical Corps of the Navy.
And where was he stationed?
Boot camp in Great Lakes, Chicago. Malaria school in Bethesda, Maryland. Hospital Corps at San Diego, California, and probably a year and a half overseas in Pango, Samoa.
And this would have been during the war years.
Yes, he was discharged in February of 1946.
Did he see any action when he was
No.
overseas? Military action, I'm asking.
Well, that goes along with it. When the children were asked, what your daddy does, they said he fights mosquitoes. He was definitely a medical corpsman.